I wish you'd say more. Yeah. Since his mind seemed to be his singular, individualistic attribute, one man decided to try and bring it more under his control. And to do so, he decided that he would try and remember this aim, that is, to do this, at all times, and thus give his mind something specific to focus on. After some years of struggle in this regard, with some success, one day it struck him. What was it in his head that would remind him to tell his mind to think about a certain thing? It was suddenly obvious to him that there was something more to this thing that men call their mind and thinking than it first seems. There are at least two minds, or one mind capable of two separate operations, or the one mind men believe they have, and then something else outside of man that also contributes to the thinking process. As he sought to get his new bearings after this realization, he was both delighted yet somewhat perplexed. There are two manifestations of man's nature: the particular individual nature with which each man is born, and the enriched, realized nature that each man can attain. This thing, this hunger, this quest, can be seen as a train or a carousel, which some men will ride for a while and then leave, some to even reboard later. But the true traveler, the real mystic who is his own source of directions, never departs the journey, but day and night, through hot and cold, in times that are fat and in those that seem lean, on he perseveres, even when it may appear he is alone on the path. Only he who is so driven and committed can be called a true seeker of that thing. Everyone wants their life to be seen as being my life according to me. The mind's grasp for individuality. Our notable quotes of the day, this time concerning the subject of talk. This quotes I'm reading here, individual. Listening to other people talk makes me nuts. Listening to other people talk increases my uncertainties. Listening to other people talk always gets me angry. Since I quit listening to people talk, I've lost almost 30 pounds. In one land, men believed there was a beautiful, mysterious, and powerful egg to be discovered. But when it was, if you then tried to describe it, it would shatter and be lost. The mind's main task is to agitate and arouse man's other aspects into activities they would have otherwise never undertaken. Just for those of you that keep threatening to write me and say, just what is it you're actually trying to get at? One man's deeper reflection on the myths representing the great hunger and quest. If man is naturally to Eden born, and properly in Paris dwells, then whence cometh these dreams of Istanbul, a place never seen, and on no map? Men will ask, is any change better than no change at all? And is any instability better than none at all? And all such questions are in truth the same, which is, any effort, any at all, willfully took, is superior to none. And just talking about it. Perhaps there's someone in attendance who'd care for a more personalized telling of an earlier read item. The primary job of men's so-called individual personality is to agitate and rouse the rest of him that doesn't seem to fall within that category. The seekers of every new generation, before they discover the secret, concoct a new name for it. As regards a story read on a previous show which said that, the reason ordinary people must think as they do is so that the future can have a chance. An extension thereof is thus: if people did think to their fullest potential, tomorrow could never arrive. Through excesses of the mind do men make themselves ill, then turn to their mind for a cure. While we speak of the quest as a search for something new that man does not yet possess, the ordinary think of such matters in terms of a desire for something old, something they in fact once had, but lost. That something specifically being their original true nature. While this is understandable and not indefensible, those who know that you can't go back, and that a more expansive, new original nature to a man is possible up ahead. Every living mystic has within him the pollen of every mystic who's gone before. And now a little item for all the budding authors in our audience. Everyone has at least one work of fiction in them, their autobiography. The seekers of every new generation, before they discover the secret, conceive of some new way to go about looking for it. One brief telling of the history and destiny of man. The forsaking of one's nature at the urging of one's mind. While this is certainly as lacking in literal validity as anything else put in words, it does nonetheless point in a worthwhile direction. One man mused, is the height of being civilized when you become at least a little paranoid about everything? In addition to the observation that just because something makes you laugh doesn't mean that it's a joke, is also the fact that just because something is absurd doesn't mean that it's not true. There are several forms of being natural. The simplistic one is being natural with minimal intellectual dependency. Another is the more sophisticated form, wherein men strive to be seen as being natural. And a third form is one never noticed by the first two groups, which someone has achieved through their own private efforts. Definition: the mind. The apparatus with which men fool themselves into believing that they're in control of themselves. I thought so. A man of any real understanding has no criticism for anyone else. He uses up any such energy on himself. The seekers of every new generation, before they discover the secret, feel as though they're at a disadvantage compared to previous generations. While activities such as this can be seen as rebellious and revolutionary, it is unique in that it presents no threat to others. Reading tip: don't bother with anything that can't be read as though 9 out of every 10 sentences are metaphorical. All men are born one thing, with the destiny of striving to become another. The physical locations that some men believe are infused with supernatural forces, representing infinite enigmas, are nothing compared to the deep mystery residing within man. From certain ancient unpublished writings comes this: most who undertake the quest stop too soon, but in doing so save themselves from going further than they should. R.E.A.W. Read it and wail. In one land, it was believed that there was something extraordinary that men could achieve in their lives. Though it was constantly talked about, no specific instructions as to how it might be accomplished were ever discussed. The nature of man's mind is to be uncalm, while the nature of the rest of him is otherwise. There is a state possible whereby these two are merged afresh. It is not proper to forsake your own true nature even in pursuit of the secret. This does not deny the fact that you must struggle against what initially seems to be your true nature so as to discover that it is not. When a man with the hunger runs across words directly pertinent thereto, they can almost bring tears, happy tears, to his eyes. Okay, so as to be as clear as possible is like this. Although you can't really lose your true nature, you can think you can, or have. Which do you reckon is the more important? That a man who knows speak in such a way that others know what he's talking about, or that he speak in such a way that he does? Oh, all right. For those who enjoy the contrary backdoor approach, this. The way to positively lose your own true nature is by correcting others and attempting to help them regain theirs. The seekers of every new generation, after they discover the secret, realize that all their concerns and speculations were irrelevant. In a land where the actions of the ruler and the people are in accord, or where they both refrain from action, in such a place are no governmental intermediaries required, no courtiers or ministers needed to describe the state of the nation's condition. Looked at in terms of knowledge, the enlightened man is he who has struggled to learn all and who then proceeds to forget it. The mind can feed till it's full and bursts, but not man's nature. Something to try. Take the idea that if you need an excuse to drink, you've got no excuse drinking, and apply it to being involved in this sort of thing. What is the success of the starving other than to no longer be hungry? And what be the achievement of the seeker of the secret other than there being nothing further he requires? Looking out upon the uncharted seas through which all sagacious sailors plow, the captain thought, if it is not steady as she goes, then she don't go. A certain revolutionist once defined liberation as the mighty stillness. The only reason that men have the word quandary is so they can describe where they live. It could be said that the superior nature possible for the mind would be one of indifference, supreme, complete indifference to those things which normally occupy the mind. A writer writes, "Why is your show called New Intelligence when you so seldom speak about intelligence?" Ah, sir, but that's all I do talk about. Knowing the secret, as perplexing as it sounds, is not actually a matter of knowledge. Once the mind disturbs a sleeping world, no ordinary man could put it back to rest. But sir, that's all I do talk about. It is, to say the least, an extremely as I'm sure you people who've been watching this can vouch. Tricky thing to talk about where it is I'm talking about. This has not stopped people throughout the ages, as witnessed by the revered books that you can find by mystical writers over the last easily 3,500 years of describing this thing describing the aim of such as this as being the enlightenment, the awakening, the liberation, the regeneration, the salvation, the mastery of the Tao, the way of life, the redemption, the rebirth. There is no shortage of people who have written about it. And after one level of people writes about it, makes some comment, it's usually they're written about after the fact, but once it is down, that there is some term that a Lao shows up, let's say, and writes about the way. And after that, it serves as a genesis for, now we have 4,000-5,000 years worth of writings still based upon that. Whole new generations pick up the idea. And so it is not that there is a shortage of people attempting to describe the aim of such as this. There would appear to be much more to the point than you might think that I'd been on through these tapings. And after that, after it seems to be has been established, or that the Tibetan branch of Buddhist activity turns it into describing it as the liberation of the mind, then we have easily now 2,500 years of writing based upon that the attempt to do such as this is to liberate the mind. And it is of no consequence what whoever coined the term meant by it now, because it is open season, that there is a continuing strain. Life is related to itself, no matter how far the generations are removed. The people born in Taos, New Mexico today, people born who will be born 6 years from now in Ecuador, are part of the progeny of the Tibetans of 2,500 years ago, or the Chinese 4,500 years ago, that you are, without any doubt, you're more or less, there's some part of you that is a progeny of Buddha and Lao and everyone else. And so it is open season. Once the aim has been described in some way that captures the fancy of men, such as the mastery of the way of life, or the liberation of the mind. If once the description has been made and it proves to be of continuing interest, that one description, then all of those who do have interest afterwards will contribute to it. And it's not a matter of me pointing out to you or making some decision whether they're good or bad. That's not even the point. They continue to contribute to the idea of liberation of the mind or awakening of consciousness. And yet they can all be described in a similar way. And I did so tonight without any touch of the mystical to it. In fact, hit on it at least 8 or 10 times here in different guises, but the first one said that the mind's main task is to agitate and arouse man's other aspects into activities they would have otherwise never undertaken. That does not sound as though on the surface that has anything to do with the life of the mystical quest. But right there is what has produced the need, the desire in men for the mystical quest. The other aspects that, let me read 2 or 3 of them again and I'll pull them together. Try this one. Just there are 2 manifestations of man's nature. Now I'm just using right now nature. People use the term all the time. Of a man's nature. There are 2 manifestations of said man's nature. The particular individual nature with which each man is born. That is a fact. that you are born with a particular nature. People are born shy. People are born aggressive. There's a particular individual nature of which each man is born, and the enriched realized nature that each man may attain. That is the two possibilities. The second one is, as a matter of fact, is what amounts to an enlightenment. It is a matter of knowing the secret and then getting there and realize that knowing the secret is not really a matter of knowledge. It is a matter of something else. It is an enriched nature. But in between those two is where people believe that they're seeking for a method, seeking for a way in which you could listen to these televised tapings and think that I never get around to it or point it out. Here is what it is based upon. Here's the way it manifests itself. When we speak of the quest, when I speak of the quest, as a search for something new that man does not yet possess, that's what I'm referring to when I refer to it. But the ordinary think of such matters in terms of a desire for something old, something that they in fact once had but lost. That something specifically being their original true nature. Once a description is given, no matter how useful it appears to be, and no matter what longevity it may achieve, such as the awakening, a liberation of the mind, and regardless of the fact of how much the originator of the term understood, once it reaches the second generation of its commentators, and it's not good or bad what they did, but once it reaches the second generation, it then becomes a matter of them looking to the past, because the feeling always is the second generation of the Taoists, the second generation of the Confucianists, the second generation of the Buddhists and the Muslims and everyone. The second generation is always a looking back, because they will take, let's take one of the oldest, the idea of there being a correct way to live, the Tao, and that the whole point, the awakening, is the mastery of the Tao. The original description would have been closer, and I'm not trying to give you history, I'm just telling you what it really was. The original description, whoever came up with the idea, would be that you simply live by what your nature was. But once man has a mind, then to say what his nature is has become, to say the very least, problematic. It has become, to say the least, less stable than to point out the nature of a tree or of an animal or the mountains or the clouds, because the nature of man is singular, because the nature of man is that he is born one thing and strives to become another. And the striving comes about through the mind. And so after the second generation of any description of what the aim of such as this activity is, they have no choice, because the second generation is in a different position. Again, neither good nor bad, right or wrong, is simply the way it is, and people do not realize it. They look back. They feel as though the second generation after Lao, to use all this symbolically, the second generation after Lao took the idea of the way is, yes, we have lost our mastery of the way. We have become too artificial, that the correct way to pursue, or the correct manner to pursue the Tao, in its full sense of what it meant, would be to live according to your true nature. And look at us. We're not living according to our true nature. Here we are, we're all dressed up, wearing clothes, and we're riding in automobiles, or back then we were riding in ox carts. We're trying to hang around court, and we're trying to get rich people to smile upon us. We're trying to become famous. We're in now conflicts with one another over meaningless matters. Does that sound like anything right up to date? It sounds like the ecology movement. It sounds like psychology. It sounds like all forms of mysticism's always been. It sounds like the heart of all religion, that we have lost the way. But I want you to see now, not some vague spiritual way that we have crossed the gods. It is, at least in the second generation, they believe that there was something specifically lost. Not just vaguely, but something specifically lost in the first few generations after a Lao. Someone who described the purpose of this, that the purpose of life, the correct way to live, is to live by the Tao, to live by the way. And that a more awake man, even though I'm now mixing up the terms, but a more intelligent man, a wiser man, a more sagacious man, would be a man who simply lived by his nature. not by his knowledge. He would not be playing with words. He would not be trying to impress other people. He would not be studying all the ways to live according to his true nature. He would just do it. Everything else is a detriment to it. You can't think how to live by your true nature. You either do it or you don't. You can't learn how to do it. You can't become educated how to do it. Just because you have a PhD does not mean that you can live closer to your true nature than an uneducated man can. And so the whole thing is always a looking back that we have lost something. It is absolutely understandable. It is not open to any criticism, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It is understandable, and it is certainly not indefensible. Because to all ordinary minds, including your own, when you become interested in such as this, you and everyone will fall immediately into line if someone says, I am here teaching the mastery of the Tao. I'm here teaching a new form of Zen, or I'm here teaching whatever, the liberation of the mind. Somebody goes, okay, that sounds interesting. And you go, because here's what it is. And you take any of those terms, the mastery of the Tao, the living by the way of life itself. You could say, all right, here's the first thing we've got to realize. We have lost our way. We no longer walk in pure step with the natural way. We have lost the ability to live by our true nature. And anyone interested at all, ordinary intelligent people, even people with a touch of mystical interest will go, how true? Now, I could take the other terms. We could be calling it the awakening. I could say at one time man was in a different state and something happened, and we have, as it were, almost gone into a state of sleep. We're walking around with our eyes open. We function, but we have in some way gone from a state that was actually more alert and awake. And it will strike those same groups of people, and another time, another place, they'll go, that's true, that's true. You know, I'm glad I found you. Or you can call it the enlightenment. You can say once men lived by a certain kind of more simplistic, more proper light of life, that we were like walking in the sunlight of our pure existence, the way we should live. And then we got too fancy. You know, we started getting sophisticated, and however they want to describe it. And now it's like we're walking in shadows, and we know it. And you'll sit there and listen and go, that's it. That's it. Even though you can't recall, or if they were really good at it, they might say, well, you were closer to your true nature when you were a child. Don't you remember when you were a child, you were delighted to get up each day? You could just have running fits and just smile until your face almost break just because somebody found a frog, a new kind of frog. Or one guy goes, look at this rock I found. I've never seen a rock like that. And it just made your whole day. That's when we were living closer to our true nature in the light of the way we should live. But now we've gotten older, we grew up, and we are almost now living in shadows. And people say it sounds right. The liberation of the mind. At once our mind was free. We were in touch with nature. We were in touch. We had a better grasp of what life was about. And then we got so much knowledge. We got so hip and so sophisticated that in fact our mind has now become a prison. We can't get outside of it. And so the idea of the liberation of the mind sounds as though, yes, once we were in that condition that our mind was liberated, and now it has fallen into captivity. It is absolutely understandable. Everyone, when they hear it, agrees to it. The reason I'm stressing it is because there's nothing amiss. No one makes a mistake to immediately hear that and go, you're crazy. If there's anything to be gained, it's something brand new. It's not something from the past. No, no, no. It takes the best of would-be mystics years to fully realize that. Because it is defensible that in a sense you have lost something. But the something you lost you cannot back up and get. And if you could, you would not be at any advantage, to say the least. You cannot back up. You are born one thing, but man's destiny is to strive. If you're sane, if you're ordinary, your whole life is devoted to striving to become something else. Or to go back and put it the first way I put it to you tonight, the mind's main task in remembering, no matter what we want to call it, or I guess by now maybe some of you will see what I'm pointing at, the mind is the thing that distinguishes man from every other creature here. So you people in the past called it the spirit and etc. I know, but it's the mind. The mind's main task is to agitate and arouse man's other aspects into activities they would have otherwise never undertaken. That is the captivity of man. That is the walking in the shadows. That is the dumbing of man. That is the belief that man has gone to sleep. That is the belief that man has been driven from an erstwhile paradise into this harsh, cruel world. There it is, in 2 short lines, 1 sentence. That is the nature of man. If you do not reach that place, you have not even matured at the ordinary level. You're not sane. You're simply not ordinary. You would not even be listening to this. Because every ordinary person, before you ever get on the great mysterious quest, every ordinary person is in that position that your mind, I know you, many times I gave you another version stuck down in here. I said those that like a more personalized version, instead of the mind, some people, it might have struck them if I'd called it their personality. That the whole point, the main purpose of a man's personality is to try, and I'm using personality now in the sense that it's something other than what you were born with. Not that they're not connected, but I'm saying it's your personality. When you came out, you had a nature, such as being shy or aggressive, like I said, but you were not actually then, at the moment that after birth, you were not then, before your mind started functioning, you were not shy old Mary, or you're not aggressive old George. You did not have an individual personality, not as ordinary people call it. You had a nature, which is a garden from which your personality is going to grow, as it's called. But the thing is, you can't escape it. You can't go back and undo it. You're not trying to return to that original nature, because you're not even in a position to undertake any effort until you get to the point that your life is by and large engaged. Strike by and large. All right, by and large. You need something to hold on to. Well, the sentence does. You're not a sane, ordinary person until your life is by and large engaged in trying to become that other than what you are. If you're following, and I mean this very simplistically, but this would be the very thing, if they took my words at face value, that contemporary psychology would find great fault with. They would say that all I was describing would be neuroses at best and psychoses at worst. That the whole point of being a saner mental person, or psychologically to be more sound, is to not have such conflicts. You understand? They say that man should not be in conflict. They simply say that. Well, it's not a conspiracy. When I say they simply say it on the same basis that all the world's major religions say, well, our purpose is to do so-and-so, and it's not. Psychology says that a man should be striving to have no internal conflict. To have this internal conflict, but not the way it is diagnosed as being a clinical psychosis, or not being subject to any clinical diagnoses by psychology. You are not sane unless you are striving to be that other than you are. Now, you've got a wide range. You can call it an infinite range, or at least you've got a range between 1 and 6 billion. That you're born one thing, but the destiny of all men is then you strive to become something else. That's what the mind does. The mind is to arouse the other aspects of man. Is that clear enough? I thought about the sentence several ways, but I put it as bluntly as possible. Take the mind, subtract that from what man is for a second, and everything left is what I mean by the remaining aspects, the rest of the aspect. The mind's job is to agitate and arouse the other parts of man into activities they would have never otherwise undertaken. The other aspects is what represents and what are truly what ordinary people think of as man's true nature. Whenever you read now, or when you read writings of 4,000 years ago, that they're speaking about man's true nature, what they're speaking of is the nature, other than whoever, all second generation mystics and writers, when they speak of man's true nature, they are speaking of every aspect of man but his mind. And again, it is all understandable, it fits, and it is surely not indefensible. To say, well, a man's true nature would be if his mind wasn't bugging him. But then from any ordinary view, you can't say, well, we can take away a man's mind. You can be in an accident. You can have a frontal lobotomy and do away with his mind, but you're certainly in no better shape. Never goes, that's true. So, geez, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't at the sequential level. It doesn't, as far as you're standing in the crowd with everyone else, you cannot see over the heads of those around you watching the parade or in the parade. The way out, the way in which this conundrum becomes unconundrumed, is right up ahead. It is not a matter of going back and regaining some original nature, which you had one. Your original nature was before your mind had the power to arouse your original nature into activities it would have never undertaken. But you cannot go back there. And so that being the case, when you present to people, and they say, well, what can you do then? And they can't see it. There is a third possibility. But what it amounts to is your own developed, new original nature. Which I know doesn't make any sense, but so what? Of course, some of you know it makes sense. That's why I can get by with it. All of the descriptions about being more awake, being more conscious, living by the mastery of the way, having Buddha consciousness. In fact, what I last few nights started talking about, and decided to just jump on fuller into it, all of the attempts to meditate, the attempts at prayer, talking to God, if you never thought about it, in all its many forms, is to take this internal agitation of the mind, this chatter, and turn it from yourself, apparently, to somebody else. That it seems to be at least a possibility of some greater joy if I turn it toward somebody else, in this case, God. Somebody that you can't find, you don't know, he doesn't talk back. You can do it in private. Nobody can tell you exactly who he is or what he thinks. And so rather than you just sitting there in your mind agitating, which is going through the rest of your life, that's its job. That it's talking, rather than you just feel like I'm talking to myself or it's talking to me and it's sometimes down there driving me crazy. It has a purpose that people discovered that they turn it and it's like, well, I'll talk to the gods. I will talk, in our case, in the Western world, to the God. I will talk to God. Instead of me just, my mind just rambling on, me chattering, and it gets nowhere. Sometimes it varies between driving me crazy or just being useless. And even at sometimes people that never stay on the transcendental train, end up in religion, they still get a sense that my mind should be playing some part in my attempted spiritual development, but I don't know what it is. Because it does things that are obviously not beneficial to a spiritual development. That is, my mind talks to me about how much I hate people going by, or all kinds of greedy thoughts. Thoughts talk in my own head that obviously is not beneficial to any sort of spiritual development. So that's obvious. So what am I going to do with it? I can't seem to stop it. And it is quite understandable that they came up with the idea that I will talk to God, which is saying I'm talking to my better possibility. Just ordinary men never realize that the whole idea of being able to conceive of God is proof itself that you could do more with your mind. You could do more with consciousness. Or you couldn't even, men would have never come up with the idea of something that is not subject, something that's not limited to this insane, redundant chatter in my head that I can apparently turn it out and go, God, please God, help me quit hating people. I know it's not doing me any good and it distracts me from trying to live closer to, or trying to find some new true nature to myself. I am continually harping on some race, some religion, some group of people, or some person. I keep recounting the past and I keep replaying grudges, and I know it's meaningless and I can't stop. Please help me. Now, just what you never thought about it, not the same amount of time that they spend praying to God, Allah, whoever it is, do you understand? The same length of time that they do that, at least they're not talking to themselves. That is, to the same degree, if every day for 10 minutes they can continue to direct prayer, an internal monologue toward God, at least for those 10 minutes, they're not listening to that chatter about how much they hate people or repaying old things. It at least does that. That was the original intent, was to try and direct that chatter away from oneself, apparently to somebody else. Help me, Jesus. Help me, Lord. And in a non-understood way, they enjoy it. It has some small, meaningless benefit to people. But I'm saying the original intent was to do that. But now back to all of these attempts, all the way from prayer to meditation, to the kind of stills of Zen sitting, just sitting with no particular instructions, just to sit. The whole purpose is to sit. That's all you need to know, is just sit. Of course, somewhere after the first guy came up with that, some of the second generation did begin, as always, to make a few commentaries like, well, all right, now it's not just sitting. I know it seems boring, but look, we know some of us were around when he was here that taught that. The point is, if you sit long enough, the mind will finally, just one day, who knows when, we're back to the grace of God, we're back to Buddhahood, selects whom it selects, and whom it doesn't select, but what are you going to do? But if you sit, the possibility is that the stillness will come upon you. One thing's for sure, if you don't do it, it won't. So you got to try something. All of this is getting back to what I gave you tonight, a very nice, concise description. To start with, the nature of man is one thing. All men are born being what they are, or to use their terms. And right now I don't mean anything in particular, or in particularly mystical about it. You were born with a nature. Really, the kind of glaring things that people believe that they should, well, I picked out two obvious ones. Shyness. I know in psychological realms today, and before today, that it's taught that it's believed that certain things such as that are some sort of acquired personality traits, and that's part of what the analysis of one's life has been, to try and go to talk to a psychiatrist or a counselor as to why you became such a shy person. You know, let's go into it. There's nothing to go into. You were born shy. But with ordinary people, that doesn't tell them anything. I can certainly tell them that, but so what? But that makes shy people go, oh my God, nobody explained it to me that way. Well, thank you so much. How much would that be? And I say, we'll whip something on me. You can tell shy people, why are you going and worrying about it? Nothing made you shy. You were born shy. Ordinary people are not going to go, oh my God, the enlightenment has come upon me and I wasn't even looking for it. Not hardly. But a man is born what he is. But that is not the destiny of man. The dog you have at home, the dog you have, some of you have dogs that are shy, some of you have dogs that are very aggressive. They were born that way. They were born with that nature. You were born with that nature. But if that was the end of it, you would be no better than a dog. That is not the destiny of man. A shy-born dog is born to be a shy dog. That is his destiny. A shy-born man, any man, you're not born being what your nature is. You're born, the destiny is to be born one thing and then to strive the rest of your life to become something else. And as I said, it has, I seriously doubt that anybody on this planet's ever tried to put it this way. And so you're going to have to, you're listening with virgin ears to virgin descriptions. But it ranges all the way. It doesn't mean you have to try and become just the opposite. And I just picked out one thing, shy. There's more to you. Obviously, there's more to your nature than shyness. There's more to your dog's nature. If you try to describe your dog, if you're trying to get somebody to keep him, and they say, well, I don't, dogs frighten me. And you go, well, he's real shy. You know that there's more to your dog than shyness. There are other things you could describe. So I don't mean it's just that one thing, and any more than just say shy is the one thing that describes any one man. But you are born with a nature. But the destiny of man is not to stay there. If you do stay there, you're flawed. And everyone knows it. You're genetically unsound. But if you're an ordinary person and genetically fairly well sound, then your destiny is not to be what you were born, it's to be what you were born, but then the ultimate destiny is to strive to be otherwise. And not just the opposite, as I was going to say, not just if you were shy, then your whole life becomes that I want to become aggressive. It doesn't mean that. It means whatever your nature is. You're always striving to be something other than you are. Why do ordinary people get up? Why do you go to work? And don't say to feed yourself. We're talking about other than survival. Why do men dress? Why do you have education? All of it is beyond the realm of the mastery of the Tao. It is all beyond the realm of being more conscious or more awake. It is all beyond the stillness that requires, or that would be inherent in a new original nature. Because it is the mind that grasps for everything that man ordinarily wants. It's not right or wrong. If you're ordinary, it is just the way it is. But everything outside man's biologically, everything beyond man's survival, biological-based nature, is a grasping. It is a striving for something that is not part of man's original nature. It's not right or wrong. There's nothing right or wrong about wanting to be rich, wanting to be famous. But it has nothing whatsoever, not in any way to do with what a man's original nature is, and it certainly has nothing to do with what a man might become. You are fulfilling your destiny to be pursuing whatever it is in life, to be thinking about. And I don't mean just physical possessions of attainment. If you're trying to attain a kind of intellectual equality with other people, that you want to be recognized as intelligent, that you read and you try to keep up with current events and you want to think like other people think, or at least you want to think the right kinds of things, that you believe that the mind is going to lead you somewhere, you are fulfilling your destiny, but you are not moving closer to any form of enlightenment. Knowledge has nothing to do with it, which I always hesitate to say that, because it can sound as though then you're getting into being anti-intellectual. But knowledge, I threw in at the last minute one of the news items tonight, was that as perplexing as it sounds, knowing the secret really doesn't have anything to do with knowledge. Because it's not a knowledge. If your mind is agitated, if your mind is having to arouse you to do what you do, whatever it be, I don't care what it is, that is not part of the quest. And in the beginning, it seems like it has to be. Because if you're going to start in the position that, well, I'm here and I'm not satisfied with what I am, so I've got to do something. You've got to remember that all attempts to arouse that part of man that is not normally arousable in this area, in other words, your body, left to its own devices, you've got to, surely some of you can do this by now, just imagine right now that you're still you, but you can cut off your mind. And still be conscious, but you can cut off the effect your mind has. Like just let's imagine there's a radio going on inside your head, but you can stop whatever effect it has on you normally. Assume that. Then the rest of you, remember the mind we call now a radio that you can separate, that you have the ability that you can turn a switch and it still goes on, but it's like the power from it does not reach the rest of you. The rest of you being just what I mean. Whatever you think's the rest of you without your mind, that's you. Okay, that's the rest of you. There you are in the morning. The alarm goes off. The rest of you, unless it was hungry, the rest of you would not get up and go to work. Now you must know that. And your job, in particular job, is neither right nor wrong. Working is neither right nor wrong. But your true nature, which is what people mean when they say true nature without understanding it, they mean all of that would be me sans my mind, sans the power of my mind over me. Without the mind's agitation, do you realize how little you would do in life? Do you realize? Well, don't laugh. Remember the preface I've left on this show this many years, just because it makes you laugh doesn't mean it's a joke. Do you realize how little you would do in life? And it's not rhetorical, it's not academic. You would not do any more than your dog would do. And somebody who, somewhere that was really desperate for a doctoral thesis, did enough survey. I think it was a team of them. If I remember, it was like 3 or 4 authors giving credit for the paper. Extensive research, nothing but observed dogs, and I forget, it was something like 92% of their life is spent asleep. And if you've got a dog and you're around it a lot, you may, when you first see it, you think, well, that can't be true. We're always playing and I'm talking to him. It may have been more than that, but anyway, you look down and you think, well, that is a fact. He's either eating, or if I'm not annoying, in other words, I'm playing his mind, I'm agitating, like, come on, let's play with a stick. If he's left to his own natural nature, to his own nature, 90% of the time, he's asleep. You would not be that far removed from a dog. No one would. But think about it. Men curse the mind under many guises, bewail the mind. They do it specifically, those seeking psychiatric, psychological counseling, and many ordinary people. You don't have to be crazy. You go, sometimes my mind is driving me nuts. I just wish it'd shut up. All the way from that to people who call it their spirit. People who believe that they are cursed by evil spirits, or people that are more religious who just believe that man is flawed, that man is now stained by some original sin. We're still talking about this. So it's the very things that men, they'll bewail their mind, but they don't understand. If it were not for the mind, they would be doing nothing. They would not be men. I know you've heard me say it enough, and you may think it's self-evident and just obvious as hell. But you have never considered that the mind's job, I say its main job. You know how charitably, metaphorically I can be. The mind's main job is to agitate and arouse man. And agitate does not necessarily have a negative connotation, but it's to arouse man's other aspects into activities that they otherwise would have never undertaken. So imagine, once you begin to see it, and just because I say it tonight, it's not necessarily all of you are going to be suddenly enlightened, but I would encourage you, those of you who still have interest in this, to consider well what I'm saying very bluntly. It is your mind's arousing of the rest of you, or it's the mind's job to arouse the rest of you, that is the non-mental parts, it's its job to arouse them into doing things that they would otherwise not undertake. Now, if you can hear that plain enough, now right quick, shift back to the idea that we had an original nature which we lost, and I point out, yeah, that's defensible, it's understandable, but it's impertinent. You understand the true impertinent? So what? You can't back up. And if you can back up, all you've done is given yourself a frontal lobotomy. It is not progress. But still consider, there is in man that feeling that we have lost our original nature. Yes, 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 yes. But then they think, well, how did we lose it? We lost it by our progress. We lost it by the very thing that men think, I wish this thing would shut up. If it weren't for this, I could get back to my true nature. No, no, no. Your true nature is to have that, making you go further and further from what was originally your true nature. The purpose of the mind, of all the faults that men have with it, of course, once you understand it, it's proper then to have some complaint with it, but only toward yourself, not others. All the complaints that men have about the mind takes not into account at all. It's just one of the cutting points to see how much a man understands, if you needed it, that he finds any fault with the mind, not just his, of course, mainly with other people's minds. How can people do such as this? How can men believe such and such when it's obviously to their own detriment? Or how can they try and do such and such? How can they say that they believe such and such when, to me, an ordinary sane outside observer, it is patently ridiculous, it's impossible, etc. That's the job of the mind. If it were not for the mind, man would not be striving. If it were not for the mind, you would not be striving and thus have a personality, because your personality, that which passes for it, ends up being a manifestation of you striving to be something that is not exactly what your nature was. I'll give you another description. I don't normally like to do it, and I don't have anybody in mind, but your idea of all the great wise or more awake, famous, real full-time professional mystic. He would be a person, a man or woman, who absolutely was not agitated by their mind. They would have their own nature, but it was not their simply original nature, because you can't go back and do it. It's why I keep trying to put in all sorts of ways about merry-go-rounds, or tonight I said, as far as look at from the standpoint of knowledge, I said an enlightened man could be seen as someone who has struggled to learn it all, which you should have. There's a great fascination if you're wired up. All good mystics, I can assure you, no matter what you think historically, they were not rubes. They were not bucolic, simple little lads out on the farm. They may have been simple guys out on the farm with no education. I got news for you. They could have thought rings around the philosophers and kings of their time. But as far as looking at it from the standpoint of knowledge, an awakened man, a more enlightened man, would be someone who had struggled to learn it all and then proceeded to forget it all. Because knowledge is not it. But you had to go along with that. The destiny of man is to think. But the job of thinking is to rouse the rest of your being, that is, what was originally your true nature, into activities it would have never done. That if you look back at there being a true nature to man, the forgotten man, the days of blissful Adam and Eve, looking at that as being the original, people only living by their original nature, that's before the tree of knowledge, remember. That looking at it in that way, everybody, or man, did have an original nature. And the original nature was undisturbed. It was as quiet, it was as still, it was as unagitated as a dog. It would have slept most of the time, it would have eaten, had a little water, a little sex, and gone right back to sleep. and died just as happy as a dog. Man cannot do that. You cannot die happy as a dog. You can't live happy as a dog. You're not supposed to. It is the job of the mind to make you ordinarily strive to be other than your original nature was, to varying degrees. Do you get any more of a hint of what it would be behind all the ideas of a liberation or a living by the Tao? It's not a return, though, and go back to living by our original nature. I mean, that's nice, but all you're asking is to be lobotomized. All you're asking for is to go back to being an illiterate child, an unintelligible child, a non-mentally active child. But you got to admit, that's why I say it's not indefensible. You can say, well, God, wouldn't that be sweet? Well, yeah, it's easy to say now that you're 35 or 40 and your life's falling apart and you think, God, boy, yeah, right. It cannot be done. But the reason that the descriptions are so captious is that it sure is a damn close description. In fact, I could say the idea, look at it from the other end, instead of a child, of thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I could go back to my true nature, when I was a child, that's when we were all closer to what we are. We didn't have all these dreams of fame and fortune and trying to get ahead and biting each other's back, clawing at one another and just engaged in all kinds of foolish activities. Our true nature, that's, God, if I could be back there. Looked at from the other end, I was going to point right quick, is the basis, one of the bases of how it came up with the idea that with age comes wisdom. Because at the ordinary level, the older people get, chronologically, just ordinary people. I mean, it's no great secret. The more they become childlike, they begin to sort of revert. They have less and less interest in things that catch you in the middle of men striving to be other than they are. The older you get, you don't care about your appearance. You don't care what people think. You don't care about wealth. You don't care about anything. You're more and more like a child. That is one of the bases of the idea that if not that men do become wise with age, it's like this general belief that they should. Or you like to see pictures, you like to see drawings, or just hear a thing about an old wise man, 90 years old, and you don't really want to be around because you figure he's a pain in the ass if you got any experience. But the idea of an old wise man, because what he is now, his mind has stopped. His mind no longer has the ability to arouse him into activities that the rest of him don't want to do. You cannot get him all excited about, hey, you could take on a second career. There are people that get a new career after the age of 70. The belief that we can return to a better state is not ill-founded, but the better state is not back there. The better state is in here, and it does have to do with doing something with this. That's all it is. And I've told you enough. I've told you what it is. And the idea of knowing the secret, it's not something you got. You already got enough. Trust me. Your mind is active enough now. That's not the problem. And I know, but your mind says, yeah, I know it's active enough, but not on the right things. Things other than life, things don't come any more well-equipped to defend themselves than this. Is it tape out? Or? We got anything left on the hour?
You have 30 more minutes?
No, I meant on the actual hour.
Oh, the actual hour is up.
Okay. Au revoir.